go. We are in Chov Vav on the base. So it's a new Mishnah. And this really now is into the shofar. We mentioned that before about all the different, if you remember, all the different shofars which were okay, besides the oral.
Nothing
There's a continuation of that, really. And it's a comparison between the shofar that's used on Rosh Hashanah and the shofar that was used, certainly in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, for fast days. And we'll have a look at that. At this Mishnah, Chov Vav Omid Beis, halfway down the page, Chov Vav Omid Beis. And let's see how we go. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah, the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, particularly in the Beis HaMikdash, was shel Yoel Poshut. Now, what is a Yoel? Yael? Familiar with the word Yael
as well? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I'm not.
I think you may have to put Peter on mute. No, fine. Okay. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah shel Yoel Poshut. What's this Yoel? Have a look at Rashi. We'll see in a minute. Shel Yoel Poshut. So it is whatever a Yoel is. We'll see that in a moment. And it's Poshut means it's straight rather than curved. According to the Tanakama, on Rosh Hashanah, you want the shofar to be relatively, I should say, there might be a small bend in it, but it's not really curved. But look at Rashi. Mafarish Tama B'Gemara. The Gemara would explain the reason why you want it straight. And this is the Mishnah. Whether that's halacha, we'll have to see. Demidi de tefillah boy pshitus. It should be straight. When you're talking about tefillah, rather than being bent over, we want straight. The Gemara will deal with that point, whether it means that you're looking up straight or whether it reflects on Rosh Hashanah. We want the heart to be straight, no curved heart, please. In other words, as we say in English, straight and narrow. That's really what we're looking for Rosh Hashanah. But what is this Yoel? Look at the next Rashi, please. Yoel, people may be familiar with this word. It's a Steinbock. People may remember the Steinbocks. There's your Steinbock. What is a Stein? It's the word ako. So it's like a wild goat. Seems to be this wild goat has a straight, uncurved horn, and that's really what we should be looking at. Now, I must say this is the preferred, because we did have the previous Mishnah, remember? Almost everything is mutter, besides we spoke about a parah. So the preferred, ideal, if you like, shofar, in the Beis HaMikdash, and today as well, according to the Tanakama, the preferred shofar is this Yoel Poshut. If you look at Tosfos, the second Tosfos, Pirush B'Kuntras Chaya is a wild animal. Shekain Shema, that's its name. B'Kurin Osa Steinbock. There we are. Steinbock, I don't know if you're familiar with the word Steinbock, other than the individuals. It's a wild. But then he quotes the Tosfos, the second Tosfos quotes the Aruch, acting normally as a dictionary. Pirush Hikispa, Nekeba. There we are. Female lamb, in English we'd say a ewe, wouldn't we? I think female. But Keren Hakispa Rogilios Poshot. Normally you do find on the female, the ewe, it is Poshot, and that's really what we're talking about in this instance. However, he prefers, rather than talking about a lamb or a ewe, which is in many instances a domesticated animal, the Tosfos continues and says, "Ukopirush hakuntras nira." it does sound like the ideal is this wild animal. The Yoel Chaya. Yoel in this Mishnah is a wild animal because we've got a pasuk in Tehillim, Horim Hagvoyim La Ye'elim. These hired mountains for the, well, if it's Ye'elim, it would be a wild, some type of wild animal, a wild goat. Again, I stress this is the ideal with the uncurved horn, uncurved shofar. And then another proof from Tosfos, Va'akoi v'dishoin, Sukkim in Devarim, talking about some various animals. The Targum of that is Ya'alo v'romo. Okay? So there we are, two different interpretations what this actual animal is according to the Tanna Kamma. Is it a wild animal or perhaps a wild goat, this Steinbock? Or is it a female lamb, the ewe? But it's
just interesting, Norman, on the cliffs near in North Devon, they're Lenten, there's flocks of mountain goats.
Oh, really?
And as you're suddenly walking along, you may suddenly descend, you know, and
oh, really?
I didn't. They have horns, and I didn't.
They have horns. Oh, well, keep an eye.
So I have now. Next time I check whether they're straight
or not.
Yeah.
And
certainly
what
got horns.
They're called wild.
No, I'm not sure.
Wild goat.
Mountain goats. I don't know what the
mountain goats. Yeah. So they're not they're not domesticated. No,
they're feral. So 1 second. They're called feral goats. And they're straight-horned. I'm just the expert has told me. Feral, straight-horned.
Oh, straight-horned. Oh, that's good. Thank you very much indeed. That does support what we're learning here. Yeah. And particularly whether it's called a Steinbock as well, I don't know. But that's the word mentioned
well,
here.
It's not called a Steinbock here. But anyway.
No, not around these parts.
Yeah,
but no, there you are. I mean, so that's good. It's the wild animal, but you've got the straight rather than the curved horns. Okay, thank you very much for that. So back to the Mishnah. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah shel Yoel Poshut. So let's stick with Rashi if you like. We're talking about this wild goat. Go down to Dorset to get one of those if you like. Oh yeah, sorry, Devon. You're a Devon man, aren't you? Yes, Devon. Okay. Upiv Metzupa Zov. In the Beis Hamikdash, have a look at Rashi, please. Piv, the mouthpiece, where after making this the horn into a shofar, Piv says Rashi, Metzupa Zov was plated, covered. Metzupa means covered with gold. B'shel Mikdash Goma. The one in the Beis Hamikdash, it was gold, but it was inside. Because if you may remember from the previous Talmud, we don't normally on Rosh Hashanah, we try not to use gold. If you remember, the Kohen Gadol himself is not wearing when he goes Lifnim Yom Kippur. He doesn't wear gold to be a reminder of the Egel Azov. So the idea here is it would be further inside, just to add perhaps beauty. There would be gold, but it's further than the actual mouthpiece. So you're not actually blowing, as it were, through the gold. More about that in due course. So Pip Mitzubazov, and very interesting. In the Beis Hamikdash, says the Mishnah, there were two trumpets from, and it sounds like min hatstodim, on either side. Have a look at Rashi again. Oh, sorry, no, have we got that? Yes, we have. No, Mitzupazov, that we have seen already. So let's just take the next line of the Mishnah. Shofar Marich, the shofar would lengthen. In other words, the person blowing the shofar, you only need one shofar, that note would be lengthened. The two trumpets, the trumpet voluntary, either side of the shofar, they would their note would be that much shorter And have a look at Rashi here. Shofar Marich. After the trumpets stop, so I jumped a little bit. Comma, after the trumpets stop, Nishma kol hashofar, then you'll hear the end of the shofar. So that continues on, and have a look continues on the Mishnah. It says, why is it that way round? So again, in the Beis Hamikdash, to add luster to the blowing of the shofar, they would have two trumpets, trumpet either side, but the trumpets would shorten their notes so that the shofar would be that much longer. Shemitzvahs hayoim b'shofar. After all, it's Rosh Hashanah. The main event is the shofar, and therefore the shofar would lengthen, or the person blowing the shofar would lengthen those notes compared to the notes of the trumpet.
Were there any parameters as to the actual chatzotros? I mean, were there? These were just like horns, were they? Or
horns.
Hunting horns or something like that. Or,
yeah. I think your son is a trumpeter, isn't he?
No, saxophonist. But
sorry.
Yeah, but presumably they didn't have either trumpets or anything like that in those days. So presumably the chatzotros were just simple bugles or hunting.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
But the question is, doesn't seem to be any requirements. I mean, there's a whole what the shofar was, but the chatzotros are just assumed whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, as opposed to the shofar, this is man-made instrument, and they're either side in the Beis Hamikdash. Whereas when it comes to the next line of the Mishnah, Batanios, on fast days, have a look at Rashi immediately. Or Batanios, the Ominun Meseches Tanis Tokua Koyanim Toku. Gemara and Tanis talks about blowing the shofar then as well. What shofar was blown? Says the Mishnah, B'shel Zochorim, male and kufufim. These were bent. Yeah. Have a look at Rashi. B'shel Zochorim, these are elim. Yeah. Sounds like rams. Shestomon kufufim. They're called Zochorim. The ram's horn, generally you'd find they would be kufufim. As we said, this bent, rather than being shutim, that we said before. That is what you'd be looking for in the ideal. So ideally, on a tanis, you'd be looking for a shofar. Here we're talking about a ram's horn. Again, this is the Tanakama. There's another view coming shortly in the Mishnah. This is the view of the Tanakama. But what about trumpets? Says the Mishnah, Kufufin upien mutsupe kesef. On that occasion, the lip was covered, not quite the lip that went right into the mouth, but just beyond that, the piv, the mouthpiece, was covered with silver. It's not Rosh Hashanah on that day. Continue the Mishnah. On that day, there were trumpets the trumpets were in the middle, with a shofar either side. And then it continues the Mishnah, shofar makatzer b'chatzotzros marichos. On that occasion, the shofar would have a shortened note, and the chatzotros would be lengthened. Why? Shemitzvahs hayoim b'chatzotros. Why were they blowing these trumpets? Have a look at Rashi. Shtei chatzotros be'emtza, shnei shofaros lohen. Each one, it looks like each trumpet had with it, coupled with this shofar. Echod mikan ve'echod mikan. One on either side of these two trumpets. V'hein be'emtza. What does it mean the main event was trumpets? Says Rashi, Shemitzvahs hayoim b'chatzotzros. Why were they blowing the trumpets on fast days? And these fast days could be because of lack of rain. Says Rashi, it was to sound. You wanted the sound, everybody to hear the trumpets, gathering people together. Every gathering was with a trumpet. We find this pasuk in Bamidbar, in the Pasha Bahaloischa, Tichsiv, if you want to call people, calling people together was done with trumpets. And that's really what you're doing. You want everybody to come together for these communal prayers that were taking place on these occasions when enacted there were certain fasts, whatever the situation needed fasts. I say it could be rain, could be a magefa, whatever the event. The main instrument should be the trumpet to call everybody together, but coupled with those trumpets, they also had a shofar. Okay. Shofar makatsu we saw b'chatzois marichos shemitzvahs hayoim b'chatzois. So back to our shofar of Rosh Hashanah, according to the Tanna Kama, you probably expect a pasuk like the Tanna Kama, but we'll see how this evolves through the Gemara. According to the Tanna Kama, the shofar is a horn which is straight, ideally straight and from this steinbock, the wild goat. Last part of this Mishnah, or still the Tanna Kama, beginning of the line, Shover Hayovel Rosh Hashanah. The shofar that you're blowing on Rosh Hashanah was the same as the Jubilee year. Now, what was special about the Jubilee year? Have a look at Rashi. Shover Hayovel Rosh Hashanah Litkiyah. Actually, before we go any further, look at the rest of that, the one extra word. The shofar that's blown every Rosh Hashanah was the same as the shofar that would be blown on the Jubilee year, Yom Kippur of that Jubilee year, every 50 years, Litzkiyah, and it was also similar in Brachos. Let's have a look at the Rashi, please. Shoba hayovel Rosh Hashanah Litzkiyah. Bipshutim. If you, according to the Tanna Kama on Rosh Hashanah, are blowing a horn, a shofar, straight rather than curved, bent, then the same rule will apply to Yovel. Says Rashi, why are you blowing a shofar anyway? Even though the fact that you're blowing the shofar on Yovel, Lolit Tfilah, it's not to call everybody together, for Tkiyos or Lizikoron as a memory. Remember Zikoron of Akedas Yitzchok? It's got nothing to do with that in the Jubilee year. Why is the shofar blown in the Jubilee year? Elon Lesiman Shiluach Avodim. Servants are freed. Bahashmotas Mechiras Sodos. Let's not get confused with the normal Shemitah year, where we talk about loans becoming annulled. What happened in the Jubilee year? Land went back to the original owner. And as we know, the whole of Eretz Yisrael divided up according to the Shvatim, according to the tribes. If they sold their land, they could only sell a leasehold, not a freehold. In other words, it was how many years left to the Jubilee year, because in the Jubilee year, all land went back to the original owner. So immediately at Shemitah, at Yovel, you've got the land of Eretz Yisrael divided up according to the Shvatim, and everything going back to the original division of the land. So again, why are you blowing the shofar? You're blowing the shofar, shiluach avodim, servants. Even if servants wanted to stay beyond the 7th hour, remember the 7th year they're going free, and if they wanted to, they could stay longer, but not beyond the Jubilee year. When it came to the Jubilee year, all servants were freed, talking about the Eved Ivri, were freed, and land would go back as hashmotas, a loosening of the sale of land. It's got nothing to do with Rosh Hashanah, nothing to do with a reminder of Akedas Yitzchak, nothing at all. It's for those two events. It's a reminder that, say, the servants should be free, the freedom of the servants, and land going back. Continue Rashi, even so, Kuter Rosh Hashanah Bo'ila Mebdei. The shofar should be the same as the shofar used on Rosh Hashanah, although there's no real link between the two, other than, says Rashi, to Gomrinon lo ligzeira shava. There's a word to do with Rosh Hashanah, a word to do with Yovel. It says Shvi, Shvi, and it comes up right in Lamed Daled, a few daf to go, I'm afraid. And in Lamed Daled, we'll see this comparison of, again, the Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year. Jubilee, although this year in Eretz Yisrael, we're still having the Shemitah year, the Jubilee year does not apply today, even midrabanan, because the mitzvah is only applicable when the majority of Bnei Yisrael are living in Eretz Yisrael. And I'm told we are actually getting close to that position, influx of people living here in Eretz Yisrael. But yeah, that the mitzvah of Yovel only applies if the majority of Bnei Yisrael are living in Eretz Yisrael. So at the moment, we're not in that position, and therefore the Yovel is not applicable at all, even midrabanan, although we do have the Shemitah, which is still applicable today. David, yes?
I mean, is this really a practical possibility, you think?
It is, in due course. I think it's getting, you're right, it is getting close.
I mean, the number of Jews living in Israel will almost certainly go above 50% of world Jewry, in the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah. So
what will happen? Will something actually happen then?
Well, at that point, yeah, they will convene and the Yovel could be enacted. Yeah, you start back to the Jubilee year.
Is it the same with Truma?
Whether what practical consequences? Not really. Other than it's very special that Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year, reminding everything going back to, of course, we have no idea exactly where. If Shimon owns property, who is Shevet Shimon anyway? So it could be a lot of people coming forward, maybe saying it's my land, but yeah, no. So we'll be up to that position. Yeah, there'll be lots of fun and games, I would have thought.
But who would convene? You said they'd convene. Who would convene?
Well, you're right. I would have to be an ultimate Bezdin then convening. Yeah, okay. Unless you say what happened by default. Once you've got the numbers, then a Yovel can be. We can start the Yovel. What it would mean in practical terms, not a lot, other than there's a special, that Yom Kippur of Yovel. Have a look at the next Rashi, Ule Brochus. The boy Lameima Tesha Brochus Biyom Kippurim Shel Yovel. The Musaf, and we normally talk about the Yom Kippur, the Musaf, the Yom Kippur Musaf not as long as the Rosh Hashanah Musaf with all those psukim, the huge Rosh Hashanah, although it's not that complex. Once one understands what's happening, you've got the psukim of Malchios, kingship, psukim of Zichronos, remembering, and psukim of Shofaros. And you have 10 psukim of each. We've seen all that. There's more coming on that in the next parak. Those psukim, it's in that way, there's this Gezerah Shava to tell us that what you do on Rosh Hashanah similarly should be done on the Yom Kippur in that Yovel year. So that's another thing just mentioned here, if you like, en passant. But where the main event we've got in this Mishnah is the shofar that you are using on Rosh Hashanah. It will be the same shape that you'd be using in the Yovel year if you actually have a tradition of this Gezerah Shava. Do you remember Gezerah Shava? Yeah, like an anchor, where you've got one word and a similar word in another halacha. And if you have a tradition passed down that you can link the two like an anchor, it comes to tell us that certain halachas apply to both. And according to the Tanakama, who does learn this Gezerah Shava, the same rules that apply to Rosh Hashanah with that shofar would apply to the Yovel as well.
Norman, I just say,
yeah,
never
Michael's
mind.
got a question. Hello.
Sorry, no, Michael first. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Just on the point about there being 50%, living over 50% in Eretz Yisrael, are there other halachic issues which stem from that also? Would that be correct? Is it the case with Truma too?
Truma, no, Truma is applicable even
Only
now. Midrabanan, maybe, but yeah, no,
but there are other. There are also other halachic issues where
Truma. I mean, Truma, Shemitah, that would still be applicable today.
Yeah,
we're taking. I mean, the main thing would be land going back.
I seem to recall there being other points.
Could be
another point.
Think about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Would be applicable
what
today.
What would happen to all the Filipino carers? They'll have to be released, won't they?
If they're
and all the land will go back to the Taba, won't it? I mean, it's going to be.
No, not that. We're talking here about an Eved Ivri.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Not an Eved. I mean, I'm not sure the Filipinos anywhere classified as avodim. They're wonderful people, and there's tremendous work they're doing. They're caring, unbelievable in Israel and around the world, actually.
But on a more serious note, I was going to ask, in the time when Yovel did occur, it must be a tumultuous event. I mean,
yes, it was. All the people, the freedom,
the state of market was all.
The land going back, the preparation of the land going back. And although you'd be giving up your land, if you bought property, let's say, that would go back. You yourself may be living in someone else's land and somebody else will be living in your land. Well, it may not be yours, but it goes back to 50 years. So it's probably, your Zadas, your grandfathers or great-grandfather,
So where would people live? Were they allowed to buy it back straight over? And where would people live? I mean, what would
it would go back automatically. Goes back automatically. So when you're buying property, you're only buying a leasehold. You're not buying a freehold.
So you've got to make plans to move. You've got to make plans to move out when it comes to
everybody will be making plans to move, and no doubt, with goodwill on both sides. You're moving out of a property. It could be that you actually, maybe you like that or not, but you're going to end up with it back to the same shevet, the same. You may not want to live next to all your friends from Shevet Shimon, but that's where you'd end up. And there was a lot. You talk about the Shvatim. There's certain characteristics of each of the Shvatim, as we see on the Medrash talks about it. They specialized in certain areas, depending where they were situated, whether by the sea or not by the sea. Remember, we talk about Yisachar, Zvulun, each one So they'd all be coming back together, so a lot of them. And you say, fishermen, it's certainly a party time for everybody, I would have thought. And those avodim, I mean, for 50 years, they could have been up to 50 years servants and now becoming free. And they're being given quite a big send-off by their master, they're having a wonderful time. I don't remember the Mishnayos, the Gemara we saw about that. In fact, those servants become free on Rosh Hashanah, and from Rosh Hashanah up to Yom Kippur, they're really living it up at the expense of their master before they're being sent off to set up. But it would have been very useful for those people because all their, presumably the fact that they became servants because they were short of money, but of course they'll get their land back. So, it's like a new beginning for everybody. So that would be, quite an event. So, something, as you say, David, if it's getting close to that, although how you doing the calculations and working out, Jewish and the numbers, etc. Yeah, who is a Jew? That's going to be perhaps a bit tricky. But anyway, on we go. That is all according to the Tanakama. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda. He disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Barosh Hashanah Toikin B'Shel Zechorim. It's not as the same as the Tanakama. The Tanakama we just learned says that on Rosh Hashanah, let's focus on Rosh Hashanah. Remember, you've got the horn which is straight. He says no. Rosh Hashanah, the ideally, and I think we know which way we're going to paskin when we talk about we're thinking about the shofar that we use on Rosh Hashanah. It should be curved, it should be bent. He says it should be b'shel zachorim. That's normally the ideal being the ram's horn. And Yovel, interesting, not comparing Rosh Hashanah to Yovel like the Tanakama did. He says, no, the Yovel is b'shel ye'elim. There's your word Yoel that we had before, the wild goat. So the Tanakama, if we're comparing Rosh Hashanah to Yovel, they're both the same. I've got a Gezerah Shava, they're both the same. They are both straight. Says Rabbi Yehuda, I disagree with you. Only regarding the Rosh Hashanah, not the Yovel. I do not compare one with the other, and therefore I agree with you on Yovel. You can have perhaps the ideal would be this ram's horn, but on Rosh Hashanah it should actually on Rosh Hashanah token b'shel zechorim. I'll take that back. The Tanakama holds Rosh Hashanah and Yovel is straight. Yeah. We're talking here about the wild goat, according to Rashi. According to Rabbi Yehuda, no. You're blowing a ram's horn, curved, on Rosh Hashanah, but Yovel b'shel ye'elim. Have a look at Rashi. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Tama Mafarish B'Gemara. The reasoning behind this will become clear. The Gemara explained, but Yovel b'shel ye'elim. Now, we had a problem. If we've got a Gezerah Shava, they should both be the same. Says Rashi, no. The Gezerah Shava lo gomer. He does not have a tradition of this Gezerah Shava. You can't make up your anchor, your two words linking up for the Gezerah Shava. He is from the school that didn't have that as a tradition, and therefore they don't have to be the same. Okay, let's see how this develops. It is worth seeing. Have a look at the Tosfos if you've got it round the side. There's a second Tosfos. Halfway down that Tosfos, the word starts umihu nire. Have you got the word umihu? Halfway in that Tosfos. If somebody has got it, we can have a thumbs up from. If you haven't got it. Have you got it? Halfway down the Tosfos. Perhaps you've got a different layout. My first word is miu. Has anybody got that? In the Tosfos? beginning show the second Tosfos, halfway, not quite actually, not quite halfway down the page. I've got the word that begins umihu. Anybody got that? Yes. So a couple of thumbs. Thank you very much. Oh, they're showing it to us. And whoa, I have even underlined for us. Thank you very much, Peter. Excellent. Umiu nira. Delo pligi elo lachatchila. This is important, and I've mentioned this before. The argument between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is only lachatchila, which means ideally. Avol kulhu modu. They all agree to yotze b'di'eved. Certainly b'di'eved you can blow any time. Bein b'shel ayil, bein b'shel yoel. Whether it's a ram's horn or the wild goat, curved or not curved, kediktoni reisha. As we learned earlier on, he calls it reisha. The first part actually puts like these two mishnahs together. It calls it reisha. The first mishnah, or the earlier mishnah on the previous Talmud, when it said kol hashofars kasheros chutz mishel para. So the only one which is out is the para, but everything else is okay. And he says, if you don't find an ayil, according to, remember, ayil would be the view of Rabbi Yehuda, Yotze b'shel rochel. Over soizim, you can have a goat, you can have a lamb. Okay, so that's important. We'll stop there on that Tosfos and go back to the Gemara. So, as I said before, we've got this machlokas, and we're talking about ideally the reason behind their approach. The Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda will be asked in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Omer Rab Levi. Just to confuse a little bit further, there's a third view, and this is Omer Rabbi Levi. Now, Rabbi Levi is not a Tana, so it's going to be difficult to actually have a third view, really. But let's see what the Gemara does with this. Omer Rabbi Levi, mitzvah shel Rosh Hashanah, v'shel Yom Kippurim, bikfufim. Oh my. The mitzvah, now we've got the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Normally, if it's nameless or a Tanakama, you'd expect the halacha to follow the view of the Tanakama. Maybe more than one view, actually. It's as there's no name mentioned. And again, let's remind ourselves that Tanakama held that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah was straight. Omer Rab Levi, mitzvah shel Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom Kippurim of the Yovel, bikfufim. Oh, v'shel kol Hashanah bipshutim. However, if it's kol Hashanah, that means a tanis, that's when it would be straight. Have a look at Rashi, shel kol Hashanah. The whole year, you're not blowing the shofar during the whole year, not every day of the week, but he means here of a tanis. Says the Gemara. Now that's interesting. That means Rab Levi is moving away from the Tanakama. Says the Gemara of Otzlan, haven't we learned in the Mishnah, we've got a Tanakama who says, shofar shel Rosh Hashanah, shel Yoel Poshut. It's meant to be Yoel Poshut, which means, remember, the wild goat with a straight horn, not like the view of Rabbi Levi. Are we therefore saying Rabbi Levi is not following the halacha of the Tanakama? Says the Gemara, yes. Hu da'omar ki hai Tana. He says like the following Tana, which actually, although we've got this Tana in the Mishnah as well, but it's clearer in this brisa. Often it's longer in brises. Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, when he's compiling the Mishnah, is trying to make them as short, succinct. Sometimes there's more detail, and we have it in this case. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Levi is of the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Ki hai Tana Desanya. We've got a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rosh Hashanah, Hoyu Toikin. That's also quite strong. What's Hoyu Toikin means? If you've got the word Hoyu Toikin, it sounds like that's what they actually did. And as we always know, if you've got a Maisa actually happened, that will certainly help you towards a halacha. If you've got a Machlikas and you know this is what clearly going back, you can see that was the adopted halacha, and that's what he's saying. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rosh Hashanah Hoyu Toikin, they would blow B'Shel Zachorim Kefufim with a ram's horn, Zachorim bent. That's the view of Rabbi Yehuda we saw in the Mishnah. More clarity here.
Norman.
But he said on Yovel B'Shel Ye'elim, right? So therefore, stop here for a second. Somebody's asked a question. Rabbi Levi is following the view of Rabbi Yehuda, telling us that the halacha actually is like Rabbi Yehuda in this instance, but not quite. Michael, yes.
Yeah, when we say Rabbi Yehuda, would I be right in saying this isn't Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? But Rabbi
Correct,
Yehuda Bar
you would be
Eloi?
right in saying that. Some Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi.
Yep.
So an earlier Tana, if you got the list of Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, of course, as you said, compiling the Mishnayos. Some Rabbi Yehuda, if you don't have any name, some Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi. And who is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi? A nice little chart. I think we gave out a chart at one time, going back a bit. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. Yeah? And then you've got Rabbi Yehuda going back to Rabbi Akiva. That whole group of Talmidim, main Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. Another one was Rabbi Loza ben Shamua, who was in fact the teacher of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi would be a generation later than Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi mentioned in the Mishnah. So you're quite right. Remember Rabbi Akiva with his main Talmidim. You had Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Loza, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, another Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. Okay, back to our Gemara. So again, we seem to be saying that our view, this Rabbi Levi that we've mentioned, is not following the Tanna Kama, particularly when he uses those words, Hoyu Tokin. He's actually telling us what used to happen, that people followed, and that was a halacha, therefore. Like he's saying that on Rosh Hashanah, they blew a ram's horn, not like the Tanna Kama. In which case, the Gemara asks, question we do find sometimes, V'leima hilchasa karabi Yehuda. Now, an Amoira does not make a statement himself unless it's something new which you don't find in the Mishnah. If you do find something that he's saying which has already actually preceded him in the Mishnah, he's just telling him what the halacha is. He should say the halacha is like this particular Tana. If it's something, as I say, not mentioned in the Mishnayos and he's saying a new halacha, that's a different thing. But if it is based on something learned in the Mishnah or a brisa, he should say so. That's exactly what the Gemara asks. V'leima hilchasa karabi Yehuda. Why doesn't the Rabbi Levi and Amoira, not in the senior ranks of the Tanoim, he should say, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, blowing the shofar, the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. That's what he needed to say. So when he says the Gemara, he couldn't say that. I Omar Halacha Karabi Yehuda. I might have thought Afilu Shel Yovel. Now notice, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda said that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is a ram's horn. And what about the yovel? What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda said, look in our Mishnah, yovel shel ya'elim. The yovel is the straight, wild goat. Notice the difference between Rosh Hashanah and the yovel. The Tana Kama says they are both the same because he's got a Gezerah Shava, right? So whatever you got for Rosh Hashanah will have to be the same for yovel. On Rosh Hashanah, the Tana Kama holds it is this straight wild goat. It will have to therefore be the same for yovel. Rabbi Yehuda says, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it's a ram's horn, curved. Yovel actually is different. Yovel is straight. What did Rabbi Levi say? Look again at the words of Rabbi Levi. Omer mitzvah shel Rosh Hashanah b'shel Yom Kippurim bichfufim. He says it's a ram's horn for both. This is a third view. So if he would have said the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, we would have said, if the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, it means a ram's horn for Rosh Hashanah, a wild goat for yovel. That's not what Rabbi Levi said. Have a look at the Gemara. I would have thought, Afilu shel yovel nami k'Rabbi Yehuda sviralei. He's paskening like Rabbi Yehuda on the yovel as well. And what did Rabbi Yehuda say as far as yovel is concerned? The yovel shofar, the shofar blown on yovel, is meant to be straight. Komash malon. That's what he's coming to tell us. Have a look at the Kamash Malon. I think there's a Kamash Malon in Rashi. Kamash Malon. Rosh Hashanah Islay Rabbi Yehuda. It's only regarding Rosh Hashanah that he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. But he also has the Gezerah Shava. Rabbi Levi comes from a tradition of having this Gezerah Shava. Whatever you do for Rosh Hashanah will be the same. Therefore, he ends up with a bit of a mix and match position. He's got the shofar, like Rabbi Yehuda, which is a ram's horn, but different to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda will say the yovel is straight. No, he's got the Gezerah Shava. So he's paskening like Rabbi Yehuda regarding the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, which is a ram's horn. And therefore, he will have to say the same shofar should be blown on Yom Kippur of the Yovel year. Are you with me? Have a look at the Rashi for further clarification. Komash malon b'Rosh Hashanah Islay Rabbi Yehuda. He's paskening like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Rosh Hashanah. And it sounds like that was the accepted ruling like this, because he says, "Oh, you taking people blew like this is how people were blowing. They're blowing a ram's horn." Avu b'yovel less slave. On yovel, again, Rosh Hashanah Islay Rabbi Yehuda. He's holding, he is accepting the view of Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Rosh Hashanah. Avu b'yovel less slave. He does not subscribe to the view of Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to yovel. Why not? Because his hands are tied. What does that mean? Whatever he's going to do for Rosh Hashanah has to be the same. In the case of the Tanna Kama with that Gezerah Shava, they were therefore both straight horns. According to Rabbi Levi, who's paskening like Rabbi Yehuda regarding the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, he's also got a Gezerah Shava, which means whatever you do for Rosh Hashanah will have to be the same on Yovel, and therefore they were both, says Rashi, Yovel lesle mishum Gezerah Shava. He's got the Gezerah Shava, and the Gezerah Shava therefore tells him it should be the same Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Okay? There is a little piece of Gemara here explaining the differences. Maybe we just make a start on this and come back to this next time. But my konifligi, we'll just start this Gemara, although there's only a couple of lines, but nevertheless. Ma sova b'Rosh Hashanah kama dekayev inish. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah, what does it mean? Kama de? A person should feel humble, bent, looking down. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, looking at Rabbi Yehuda first, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, a person should have the same mode, just like the shofar is curved, a person should be curved, looking down. A bit of humility, please, for Yom Kippur. Kama dekayev inishtate, how much a person should bend his mind with his feeling of humility to fei male. Male means that's better. It's a malo. It's something extra. Tfei, it's more, that is the preferred route. Yom Kippurim, quite the contrary. On Yom Kippur, the whole point of the shofar is part of this announcement, as we said before, the big fanfare. So there we want this straight shofar. Kama de poshit inashtate fei male. We want this to say it's a glorious day of Yom Kippur, on the Yovel year, with the freedom and the change of properties, and therefore it's straight. Everything's going back to as it was before. I like this idea of, it's straight because the properties are where they should have been to start with. Yeah, that's the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Umar Sovano, Rosh Hashanah, Kama de Poshit Inishtate Feimale. On Rosh Hashanah as well, a person, it's a different idea behind this. When it talks about straight, it means a person's heart should be straightened, not the humility aspect. It's focusing on, we want to try, if we can think about, of course, the shofar does arouse thoughts of teshuvah, etc. And therefore, it's straightening out the heart, straightening out the feeling. We're putting our hands up to Shemayim as we pray to God. So there you want this straight shofar, the shofar that should be straight. That's according to the Tanna Kama. Continue the tomorrow. Actually, we did finish it, didn't we? I've got a little bit. If you look on the side, it says Hagor Sabach, a little aleph. On Yom Kippur, Nami. Yom Kippur. This is going with the Tanna Kama. Nami de Goma Gezerah Shava. It's going to have to be exactly the same. In fact, they both agree. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Tanna Kama regarding the Yovel. It's straight. Why straight? Everything's going, as we said before, on Rosh Hashanah, on the Yom Kippur of Yovel year, everything's going back to the original state, and therefore everything's straight. Straight. Says and the final line, Ubatanias kama dekaya finish date tfeimale. When it comes to Tanios, that's different. Atanas, then, according to the Tanna Kama, that's when a person should feel this humility. And therefore, according to the Tanna Kama, when it comes to Atanis, we do have this idea according to the Tanakama, of that's when we should feel this humility after all this Tanesim, whether it's a lack of rain or Magefa or plague or whatever it is. That's when we want this idea of this humility, and therefore that's why the Tanakama, when it came to Tanis, had the bent, the curved shofar. So in summary, we probably want to talk about halacha. As we know, the halacha, of course, is like Rabbi Yehuda. Or Rabbi Levi, mitzvah shel Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur b'kfufim, which we now bent. The idea is we're always taking this idea of this humility. We're paskening like, look what it says, Omer Rabbi Levi. Next to the word Levi, I've got a little dalad. That takes me up to the top right-hand corner. And no time for that today, but it's in the Rambam and also quoted in Shulchan Aruch, that the ideal is to have a ram's horn. So the ram's horn, this idea of this curved, we should feel this humility on Rosh Hashanah. The same on a Tanis, it would have to have this, as we said in Rab Levi, Mitzvah Shel Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, leave the Yom Kippur, of Rosh Hashanah. And according to Levi, he's taking the view, just in summary, he's taking the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda's view is that on Rosh Hashanah, you should feel this humility. And also reminding of the ram's horn of Yitzchak. But besides that, also this humility, that's the focus. We've got a Gezerah Shavuos, so it'll have to be the same on Yom Kippur. However, the rest of the year, to show that they're differentiating between Tanis and Rosh Hashanah itself, therefore the Tanis would have straight shofar. Okay? And that's how we finish. We'll close that for today. I'm trying to get to the end. And as we've seen, and as we know, that it is the ram's horn that is blown on shofar. But worth remembering, if in fact that's not available, then add a shofar which is not that shape. And you may have longer shofars, different types of shofars. That's all actually permitted, but the ideal is this ram's horn. That's how we're paskening like Rabbi Yehuda, as Rabbi Levi's actually told us. And this idea, I say, mainly the kaya finish, this humility that's needed when we have this shofar being blown on Rosh Hashanah. And with that, gentlemen, we're close for today. How are people placed for next week? All okay?